Hi there friends, this is Brent Hears. The title of today's video is The Campaign of the Self. So if you found that to be sufficiently enticing to click through, I appreciate you being here. What I want to explore with you is a psychological texture that I've been playing with over the last little while, that when I consider it and when I open it up and when I kind of play with it and experiment with it, it feels really good. It feels very wholesome, feels very holistic, feels very much like myself, like I feel like my old self again. It feels like a return to my original creativity. It feels like a wiping clean of the old slate, starting fresh. And as such, it feels like opportunity. It just feels like, I can go in any direction I want. I can do whatever I want. It feels like a return to liberation and freedom. And so that is all a product of this psychological texture, which is looking at the campaign of the self. So I guess a good place to start with is on the subject of ambition, because my whole life I've considered myself to be this really ambitious person. There's all sorts of things that I want to achieve and get. And I remember particularly in school, as I'd go through primary and secondary and post-secondary school, I would always consider myself to have all this potential. It's like, oh, here's all this stuff that I'm going to do in the world. I'm going to do this and that, and it's going to be great, and all the fame and riches and wealth and success and all these things. And there was all this promise about my life that I had for myself, and every once in a while I'd get from a teacher or so, and it was really nice. And then I came time to graduate, and then everything changed once I graduated and I was no longer in school, because then I stepped into this territory of, okay, well now I need to actually make real all of the potential. And then really that put me in quite a depression, because it's like, oh my God, this is really hard. It's really hard to change your habits and, build a business. And there's actually a big learning curve with a lot of these things. And none of this is as easy as it seems, even if the vision is there. But the problem is that I was so invested in this idea that I had. In other words, the campaign that I had on life, the amount of success that I wanted to achieve, that whenever I would look at the campaign and consider where I felt like I was supposed to be, and where I looked at where I actually was and the disparity between those two things, it would make me feel sad. And then I would go into a lot of self-abuse, like I'm not trying hard enough, I'm not doing enough, I'm not working smart enough, I'm not reading enough, I'm not learning enough. And I would just keep, accumulating this big basket of not enoughness. So I wonder if this is you. I wonder if you resonate with any of this experience. And because if you do resonate with this experience, then you're in for a real treat. Because what I would find every once in a while, especially when I would look into spirituality, reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and kind of, going deep into the practice of awakening, enlightenment, and just learning and practicing and kind of going into this territory, there would always be a message that would surface in this kind of rhetoric that would suggest that you should release and let go of the campaign of the self. And what I would notice whenever I consider this, as you may also notice, is that to let go of the campaign of the self, if you were to imagine just like right now, imagine just giving up on everything. Imagine giving up on your life. Imagine giving up on everything you feel like you're supposed to accomplish in this lifetime, everything you feel like you're supposed to change or correct about yourself. Imagine just And not giving up in such a way where you just roll over and die, but giving up in such a way where you're not trying to do anything in particular anymore in any grand sense, right? So just get into that headspace for a second. It kind of feels amazing, doesn't it? It feels like, wow, like holy shit. like it feels, for me anyways, it feels light. It feels, just like everything I was describing a little bit earlier when I started this video. It just feels like freedom, feels like liberation. It just feels like I'm free to start enjoying my life. I'm free to start enjoying things as they come. And it's really, it's very attractive. Now, what you might also notice if you're kind of following me with this experiment is when you imagine giving up on your ambition, giving up on your designs on life, giving up on all the things you're supposed to do and accomplish in this lifetime, it might also freak you out a little bit. It might feel a little bit scary. And the reason for that is because I've also felt this fear is I've invested so much meaning and significance into the campaign of the self. So I've made it into something that I must do, and I've invested so much promise energy into it. Like I'm promising myself, promising the world, I'm going to do this, do that, do this, do that. That it feels like now I have to. Now I'm bound to these promises, and if I don't, then I will be a failure. And of course, being a failure is the worst thing in the world, according to this kind of psychology. So the purpose of this video, or part of the purpose of this video, is I want you and I to we're not going to make any permanent changes. We're not going to commit to anything. We're not going to do anything on the level of executive action. But we're just going to explore the territory outside of the campaign of the self. And as we do, we're going to follow our intuition. And we're going to follow how the body responds. So for example, does the body feel lighter? Does it feel better? Does it respond positively to what we're doing? And we'll take that as a clue that we're moving in the direction of health and wellness. Or is what we're doing, making our body contract and feel heavy, in which case we're moving in the direction of unwellness and heaviness and disconnectedness. And we'll see if we can find anything useful in this territory outside of the campaign of the self. And we'll also explore the utility of ambition. Is it useful to have ambition? Is it good to have big dreams, to have designs on making millions of dollars, to become one of these really people who are really successful in the capitalist game or in the stage orange game, if you're looking at it from a spiral dynamics perspective? Is it useful to play to win? Is it useful to really care about this kind of thing? I guess that's a good place to start. So, here's one way that we can consider ambition. We run into trouble when we consider ambition to be of 100% importance. I'm trying to do things from your left to right, not my left to right anymore. So of 100% importance. If we consider achieving our goals and achieving our dreams, even the really super lofty ones, to be of 100% importance, it may increase the likelihood that we'll accomplish it. But it will also mean that our sense of wellness and our sense of completion is suspended until we accomplish all of these things. What's also a basic guarantee is that when we do accomplish these things, we will be so practiced at suspending and holding at bay our sense of wellness and wholeness and fulfillment that even when we do accomplish these things, we will push that milestone post even further away into something that's not immediately attainable, so that we can go back on the journey of chasing down our wellness. So that the psychological game that we're playing is set up so that we'll never win, so that we'll never arrive, so that we'll never feel whole, so that we'll never feel good about ourselves. What's interesting is that in many of my conversations with people, friends, clients, is that I would ask, sometimes just for fun, would you be interested in accessing that level of wellness and that wholeness right now? Seeing as there's no condition that really needs to be met in order to attain it, right? Like we come up with conditions, right? That's what ambitions do. It's like, once I get all this money and success and visibility, that's when I'll finally have made it. That's when I will finally have arrived. And then that's when I'll finally feel good about myself. That's when I'll finally be free and I can do whatever I want. So we say, like, we arbitrarily take these conditions and attach it to our wellness, saying that once we get there, then we can have our wellness. But those conditions don't exist in the natural world. You can access this wellness, this arriving at home within yourself right now. In all likelihood, we come into the world, we're born into the world with this sense of wholeness until we learn from our culture to suspend our wellness and put it on conditions, and then only release that wellness when the conditions are met. There's a huge cultural bias against accessing your deepest wellness right now. One of our reasons for not accessing that wellness is we say, well, I would become lazy. I would lose my edge. I would stop trying. I would be giving up on my dreams. That's not acceptable. And again, it's like embedded deep in the culture is never give up on your dreams. Like that's, for better or for worse, for right or for wrong, inside of our culture, stage orange culture, capitalist culture, it's always never let go of your dreams. Like that's the highest and most important value. And no matter what, you're always moving towards your dreams. And as long as you're moving towards your dreams, like that's good. And if you give up on your dreams, that's bad. And I'm not, by the way, saying to give up on your dreams, or I'm not saying either way, but I'm just pointing to very sensitive zeitgeist programming for you to see and look at. So what if you were to access that wellness now? And again, this is just experimental territory, so let's play along. Let's try it out. There's no harm in trying it out. Let's suppose for a minute that there's nothing wrong with you. And let's suppose for a minute that there's nothing that you need to do in particular before you die. There's nothing that needs to be corrected. There's no one for you to save. There's nothing essential that you must contribute. Must, capital M, must, like as if it would be unacceptable if this thing didn't happen. There's nothing that you have to do. There's no one you have to impress. There's no heaven to get into. There's no hell to avoid. There's nothing in particular to do. Nowhere in particular to go. And here you are with some time on your hands. When the idea of this video that I was making was first born, I wanted to do a reprise on one of my earlier videos called How to Orient Yourself Properly Towards Time. It was going to be part 2. Because if you're oriented properly towards time, then time isn't a scarcity. One thing that you can count on with almost any human being that you run into, this is zeitgeist thinking. This is deeply cultural thinking. And human culture, not just Western or Eastern, North or South. It's just human culture. We look at time as a scarce and depleting resource, of which we do not have enough, which is running out. And then we just live with this background stress. Oh my God, we're running out of time. Like, oh my God, the hour's already over. The day's already over. Oh my God, the year's already over. Where's the time going? There's so much that I have to do before the window of time closes, is the psychology that we live from. But when we step outside of the campaign of the self, which is to say, when we step outside of this sense of incompletion that we're convinced needs to arrive at a state of completion. Otherwise, it would just be so bad. There'd be, so much regret, shame, guilt, whatever. It's like I have to complete the self. I have to accomplish the campaign. Must, have to. If we step outside of that, then time, there's a reversal of time as a resource where it's still a valuable resource, but now it's just extra. Imagine somebody comes up to you, hands you $100. It's like, I have $100 extra bucks. I have $100 extra dollars. What would I like to do with it? It's yours to spend as you wish. There's nothing in particular that you must do with it. There's no right or wrong way to use it. It's extra money. It's extra wealth. No strings attached. It belongs to you entirely. It's your property. It belongs to you. Same to be said about time, your life. Do with it as you please. Yes, we're operating in a world with other people, and so you can't encroach upon other people's free will. There's rules, there's the justice system, but even then it's still, as we discussed in an earlier video on freedom from obligation, it's still your choice to do as you will within these rules. Break the rules, receive the consequences. Follow the rules, receive the other consequences. Ultimately, your choice. But the big focus here is you outside of the campaign of the self. And if you're wondering, does this have anything to do with productivity? Here's where I'm at. Here's my leading edge. So this is the shit that I'm figuring out in real time, because as I share this with you, I love all of this, but there's still unknowns, there's still blank spots and question marks as I transition into life outside of the campaign of the self. For me, I feel like that's where my future is, to move outside of the campaign and to reclaim wellness and wholeness right now. Zeitgeist cultural thinking says that without the campaign, we'll just be lazy. We'll just give up and be lazy and just get fat and just melt into the dirt and decompose and die. But that's not true if you look anywhere else, say in the animal kingdom. You don't see that happening. You see there's great motivation. And also, before stage orange capitalist thinking was even invented, and by the way, stage orange just refers to just like the psychology of accumulating and having and bolstering the sense of self, this kind of thing. I highly, highly recommend you look into spiral dynamics if it's your desire to be fascinated. Leo from actualize.org has an amazing series on it, so you can go there and listen to that. I have to reclaim my thread here. What was I saying? Right, so productivity outside of the campaign of the self. So is it possible? Yes, right, oh yeah, because all of us were productive before and outside of cultural zeitgeist thinking. And how are we productive? Well, see, we're creative beings. Just imagine in yourself, like I might ask you this question, like what's something that you've been waiting for an opportunity to do? I love this question. What have you just been waiting for, like now that you think about it, months or maybe years for an opportunity to do? You're gonna write your song, make your play, write your poem, start your business, train for a marathon, what's the thing, practice baking sourdough bread. What's the thing that you've been waiting to get a chance to do? Right? And so now imagine, so take that, put that here for a second, and imagine that there's no campaign of the self. There's no campaign on you. There's nothing about you that requires completion. There's nothing important, like of incredible importance to do. You're free to do whatever you want. Can you imagine just going ahead and doing this thing? Even your sense of procrastination starts to fade away, because when it comes to the campaign of the self, it always feels heavy. Like sometimes we're filled with motivation, like especially in the beginning when the campaign is conceived, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to do all this stuff. Oh, it's going to be amazing. And we're full of motivation. But then the motivation starts to wear off and it feels really heavy to pursue and do work towards the campaign of the self. And when it comes to the campaign of the self, either we find a way to get out of it in the form of procrastination. So we waste time on YouTube or video games or whatever. And by the way, wasting time is a term that only applies to the campaign of the self, not outside of it. Or maybe you can convince yourself to do some work. You just do a whole bunch, do a whole bunch of coffee. You drink a whole bunch of coffee and you pep yourself up and you go for it, rah, 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 and you get some work done and you go and you make it happen. But it's always moving against yourself. You're always moving against your own reluctance. You always have to overcome your reluctance in order to get yourself to move the campaign forward. That's the nature of the campaign. Whereas outside of it, like a whole different host of questions come online. It's like, what do I want to do? What would I like to create? And so then, okay, maybe you want to take some time to learn music theory, which I've been doing a little bit of lately, just brushing up on music theory. It's fascinating, right? So it's like, okay, I'm just going to learn about it. I don't have to get myself to do it because I don't need to push my life forward with it. I don't need to look cool in front of other people with it. I don't expect me learning music theory to get me anywhere in particular. And so there's no secondary, there's no ego-based benefit that comes from it. And so it's done just from a place of pleasure, of interest, of curiosity. There's nothing to prove. As soon as I'm no longer interested in theory, I can just stop learning music theory. Whereas from the perspective of the campaign of the self, it's like, I'm going to learn music theory and then I'm going to become the best music theory person, or I'm going to, and then when I do that, then this is how I'll become famous and successful, and then everybody will know who I am, and then I'll finally feel okay about myself. So in other words, I'm not learning music theory in order to feel okay about myself because I already feel okay about myself. So then the flow state comes online, because another thing I've discovered is that the campaign of the self and the flow state being this beautiful, natural, organic, psychological state that we get into, it's like a whole different brainwave. Time dilates and distorts, and like new creative shit is coming online. We're just having such a great time as we're creating, and we're just in the flow state. Like, so that, like, the flow state and the campaign of the self are just, they're like night and day. They don't touch. They're never in the same place at the same time. Because whenever we're doing something in order to bolster our ego and make ourselves feel safe in the world, flow just doesn't appear, because flow isn't motivated that way. Remember when you were a kid? Maybe you remember when you were a kid, when you were 5 or 6 or 10 or maybe 12 years old, and you remember seeing all the adults running around and they were like so stressed and like off their rocker and like were taking on so much, and you just couldn't understand it. And they're talking about like, yeah, but you gotta work hard in this world, and you have to rise and fight for it. And you remember being just like, what the hell are you talking about? Like all this, like, especially in a downtown city core where it's like all this hustle and bustle and movement and nervousness and anger and irritation. And you look around, you're like, what the hell is going on with these people? What's going on? I don't get it. So that's Flow's question about the campaign of the self. What the hell are we doing? I don't understand. None of this is significant to me. What you can do then is you can start to experiment with life, going, after we're done this, because I'll be wrapping this up soon. You can just experiment, say in the upcoming few days, what's life like outside of the campaign of the self? Okay, here we go. Here's the takeaway. Here are the steps. For those of you who accuse me of not being practical, I'm going to give you some shit that you can do. So number 1 is journal out. So create a new page. The campaign of the self being the title, put it in bold, size 16 PT font, the campaign of the self. And then underneath, write what the campaign is. So write, and you might be like, well, how do I do that? So you'd be answering the question to, what am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to feel? What should I be doing with my time? What's the right way to be spending time? What's the right way to live a life? So all of this stuff that comes from judgment and obligation and rightness and wrongness, all of that is what the campaign is. And everything that you write, that will be everything that you've positioned between yourself and freedom. You're like, once I've checked all these boxes, then I'm free. Then I can actually do what I want. So what is that campaign? How would you know when you're done? And so journal it all out. That's step one. Step two is, with that all out, read it, look at it, and then give yourself a weekend or a week. Give yourself a whole week where you're not contributing to the campaign of the self. So notice internally, does it freak you out? Does it scare you? Notice how the psychology of the campaign will threaten you and say, well, you're gonna fall behind. You're gonna be wasting time. You're gonna be falling behind your peers. Everybody's getting theirs and you're not getting yours, and everything's gonna be scooped up before you get there. Look at all the fear that motivates you to keep on the campaign. So observe that. And see if you can insist on just, what is it like to have no campaign, no incompleteness, nothing that must be done? In other words, what is it like to be completely free and to be in a place of total ownership over my life? Just those two steps, 1 and 2. Let me know how that goes. If you're interested, you can get a coaching session, one-on-one with me. We can discuss you and your productivity, how to get you outside of the campaign of the self, what that might look like. If you feel interested, drawn toward it, I would love to meet you. The link is below. You can sign up for my newsletter. There is a free PDF that is how to get yourself to do the thing. So if you insist on acting from the campaign of the self, this will help. And you'll receive a follow-up series called the Sustainable High-Level Productivity Course. And that will be 4 videos that will be mailed out to you, and that will help you access productivity from a place of flow. So it'll help you transition out of the campaign while maintaining your goals, which are valuable. The goals are still good, but it's what we invest, the sense of self and ego that we invest in the goals. That's what's hurting us. Thank you for watching. Please hit like. Please leave a comment if you're so inclined. Please subscribe. See you on the next one.